Our talk this week is about the great work, and it's about living in your genius. And there are some people who just have this amazing genius for living in love and living in joy and bringing joy into the world. I think of our kids. I think of the beauty that our musicians are, especially you, Dave. It's so good to have you back. And this week we're also talking about the great work that is actually your life. So many people come to me and ask, Reverend Kathleen, how do I know my life purpose? And generally, I can't tell them. Generally, what I can tell you is that I know what it's not. Your great work is not something you're supposed to suffer in. Your great work that is your life is not the thing that your grandparents and great-grandparents told you you had to do in order to be loved or in order to be part of a family. Your great work is something that is way beyond earning 6 or 7 figures, or 8. I suppose we may as well make it bigger, 12. Your great work may or may not ever be seen by the rest of the world. The people who love you will know it. And your great work truly does come from within you. It is to reveal the divine. And that can mean so many different things. So your purpose is to manifest God in the way that only you can. And there's an invisible and an exvisible and a visible side of that, just like there is of God. So the visible part is actually the easier one to define. In The Big Leap, Gay Hendricks writes, the goal in life is not to attain some imaginary ideal. It's to find and fully use all of our own gifts. So what if being fully realized, as the psychologist would say, what if being truly on purpose is something that you will see in the world because it's just filled with joy? It's not just fun, although it will be that too, probably more often than not. But it's something that gives to the world. It connects you to all the other aspects of the divine that people your world, and you actually like doing it. It's where the needs of the world and your need to express come together. And so we spend a lot of time looking for how do we figure out our life purpose, which is very different from a career. It might be your career if you're lucky, but it's not the same thing. How do we know what it is we're supposed to be doing? It wasn't Carl Rogers. It was the mythology guy, Joseph Campbell, who said, follow your bliss. Now, bliss doesn't mean stop paying your bills and sit there and be all blissed out. It doesn't mean only do the fun parts. Following your bliss is that thing that will fulfill you, that will make you whole, that will have you looking in the mirror and say, I'm really proud of myself and the things I've done in this world. I'm really happy at the end of my life. I have no regrets, and I am so happy with how I chose to spend this time on the planet. That's your bliss. That's the great work, is finding and living from that. Now, in many different fields of psychology, many different areas of study, we have ways of figuring out what that purposefulness looks and feels like. In The Big Leap, which is the book that I worked from this week, they talk about 4 stages of competency. The stages of competency mean the things that you can or choose to do in the world, and where you fall in your life. So for the first stage is the zone of incompetence. Oh, excuse me. My zone of incompetence, many of you already know, includes gardening. Now, it doesn't mean I can't learn. It doesn't mean I won't keep trying, because in some ways it really serves me to play in my zone of incompetence. But ladies and gentlemen, you all know I've killed mint, which is an invasive weed. And so I spend time and money playing in the dirt, knowing that I should not spend all of my time there. Those of us who are, say, recovering perfectionists get great good out of mucking about in things we don't do well. It's not just humbling, it's all about self-acceptance. No, I don't do it well. Yes, I'll probably kill many, many more life forms every single season. And you know what? Eventually, I'm going to figure out the basics. And so it's possible that I'll take my zone of incompetence, that thing that I don't do well and probably shouldn't try and make a living at, and turn it into a zone of competence. Now, a zone of competence is you can do it, but so can just about everybody else. So can just about anybody else. One of the great debates in ministry is whether or not the minister should be, Albert and I have actually argued about this once or twice, whether or not I should be allowed to change out the toilet paper. It's something I can do. But so can anyone else, frankly. There are many volunteer positions within the center, like folding the bulletins, that anybody could be doing. And it's not a great use of our resources to have me doing it every week. And so I don't do it. I purposely did not learn how to do the bookstore stuff, because I'll be in there playing and not actually doing what's mine to do. Our zone of competence might be something that, we just don't really think about, but it's actually a skill. It's actually something that, you could be doing it, and it will get you fed. I spent years as a receptionist, and, just like dang near everybody else in America, I know how to pick up a phone and say hello. But it wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't where my joy came from. So where is your zone of incompetence that you might play around in? Where is your zone of competence that it would be just as easy to let somebody else do that? And then there's next is your zone of excellence. Your zone of excellence may well be where you're making a living. Your zone of excellence is something you're good at, something you know how to do that maybe other people don't. I spent many years doing clerical work, working in an office, and I got pretty good at it. You've heard me say in the past that if the attorneys wanted something done and done right, they called me, because they knew I'd stay after on a Friday night and work on their transcription or make sure those cases got put together. They knew, well, apparently they knew I had no life, but that's not exactly the truth. Your zone of excellence often is a safe place for you. I know that when I was at the public defender's office, by the end of my 10 years there, I knew where the pens were. I knew where the courthouse was, and I know which room to speak to whom about what. What number should I call? Because I had all of the backdoor phone numbers. That was my zone of excellence. It felt so safe. And by the end, it was so boring. It was really hard to get up on some Monday mornings and go do that. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? You know that your zone of excellence is that thing that you might be trapped in that 6 or 7 or 12 figure salary that's really hard to walk away from. I remember when I first went to full-time ministry. My mother, bless her heart, asked if I couldn't possibly do ministry on the weekends and keep my nice, safe government position that had health benefits and a union. The answer was no. No, I couldn't. Because there is a part of each and every one of us that knows when we're playing it safe. Now, there is a leap that needs to happen to go to the fourth zone, which is called your zone of genius. This is the type of leap that you take, or that many of us take on purpose when we jump out of airplanes so that we can face our fears. When we choose to go do something in public from our zone of incompetence in order to just prove that we are willing to go for it and let the chips fall where they may. It may be that your zone of genius is something that is not anything your friends or family would know you long to do. I would suggest to you that you might want to learn who to trust with that information, who to trust to support you. If your friends and family don't know you well enough to know that your absolute heart's desire is to be a life coach instead of an accountant, or play the guitar like David Bear and you just want to do that and write the music yourself, if your friends and family don't know that, I would suggest to you that you are robbing them of knowing you. And maybe you need to find some people who you can try out trusting. Now, this month we're listening to our heart, so I encourage you to figure out who those safe people are. Brene Brown talks about your move the body friends. The people that you could say, I need your help moving the body. And they would show up. And they would not shame you. And they probably wouldn't ask too many questions. I certainly wouldn't, because I don't want to be able to testify against you. These are your move the body friends. I watched the movie Harriet last night. And one of the things Harriet Tubman's father used to do was put on a blindfold when she came in to pick up more people, more family members, and take them through the Underground Railroad and move them north into freedom. He would wear a blindfold so he could honestly say, I didn't see her. These are the friends you want. These are the friends you trust with your deepest, darkest sides of you, so you can practice allowing the God in you out into the light to be seen by the God in others. So what else is your zone of genius about? It makes sense to me that we would figure out what a genius is. Now, the term genius goes way back. It actually goes back, it was first recorded as being used in like 1350 to the 1400s in Middle English, coming from the Latin, from a word which talks about your particular deity or the genius of a person. If you talk about Socrates had a particular genius, or in the older term, demon, D-A-E-M-O-N, the spirit guide that led him into speaking and teaching the way he did. If you have a genius for music, that doesn't mean you don't have to practice. I'm sure if you ask David Bear or Jackson Roush whether or not they ever had to practice, put in that proverbial 10,000 hours that take you to mastery. You have a genius for music, but you still need to put in the work. You might still need to learn the scales first on your instrument of choice. In more modern day language, genius is someone who tests on usually the Stanford Binet assessment at an IQ, an intelligence quotient of, depending on where you go, it's either 140 plus or 160 plus. I know you have to hit 200 points in order to hit Mensa. That level of genius is defined culturally. And I want you to remember that that way of understanding genius is very limited. One of the things that set me free in the study of psychology was finding out that genius, according to the Stanford Binet, really only told you how well you would do in a typical middle-class school system. And ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't do well in the typical middle-class school system, I'm here to tell you that the way things were taught back in my day, which, yes, were last century, but not that long ago, it only 35% of the population actually learned the way people taught. So really, you had a very slim chance of doing well or extremely well in the school system. Now, I was very lucky that that's how I learned, that became part of my identity, that I was one of the smart ones. The trouble with being defined by somebody else's definition of genius that's too small is, what if I take a test now and I find out that my IQ is not all that high? There are days, there are days I know I'm a smart woman, and then there are days I try and get out of my car with the seatbelt still on. I learned not all that long ago that my little brother, who didn't go as far in school as I did, has a much higher IQ than I do. Maybe that's why he has no student loans. Being a genius is something that you're going to have to figure out how that works for you. Now, in this day and age, we have learned that IQ is not the end-all and be-all. There's something called EQ, or emotional intelligence, how to relate to people. There's also something that, I want to say is it Sandra or Holly Wigglesworth? Came up with the spiritual IQ, which is your spiritual intelligence, and that can now be tested. It really does a lot to define how well you do in life in general, how well you do in your spiritual life, in your life in relationships. And so once again, we're defining genius in a really kind of a limited way. So your genius may well be being able to put on makeup. That takes an artist's hand. Your genius might well be interacting with children that nobody else seems to get. I've seen some people work with autistic children who have a challenge in communication, and within minutes they're chattering, they're saying words, they're doing whatever that teacher wants. It's really frustrating to those of us who got the degree and still can't get them to say our name after 8 months. No, I'm not that bitter. Okay, I have some forgiveness work to do. We all have our own flavor of genius. In order to live from your genius, you're gonna have to give up safety. Now, some of us jump out of airplanes to do that. That is not me. Believe it or not, I found it a lot less frightening to walk through fire, which I've done, to prove to myself that I had the courage to make that leap into living in my zone of genius. I happen to believe right now that my zone of genius is ministry, and I am willing to bet you actually do know where your zone of genius is. It's that thing you do without being paid. It's that thing you do whether anybody knows about it or not, because that's what you would like to be doing. It's that thing that you keep coming into different versions of doing over and over, whether you choose to consciously or not. I started my college career as a theater major. I knew when I was little I wanted to be on stage, not in the movies. I knew it was Broadway for me. I knew. But then I got adult and became very responsible and discovered a zone of excellence that was socially acceptable. And now here I am making a living on something that very much resembles a stage. But it had to pull in other parts of me. The part of me that is a psychologist, the part of me that is a minister. All of it comes together, and you know full well right now, you're thinking of something. I can only use me as an example. But I know full well, and I will know it for you and with you until you're willing to admit it for yourself, that there is a magnificent soul living within you that wants to explore your godness. And that takes us to the invisible side. This is where religious scientists really shine, because we know that everything starts on the invisible side of life. And so it starts with our own attitude and our belief. At one point in my life, right after I got my first master's degree, I was working in the layaway at Kmart, and I hated that red vest. I was embarrassed by it. And so I was not a very good employee. And as soon as I had an excuse, I quit. And I went back to something that made more money, which was clerical work. And at some point, the genius that is the divine within me ran across the story about the man who was laying bricks with all of his co-workers, and he, out of all of them, seemed cheerful, was singing, was happy to get up in the morning. You could see he glowed with it. And all of his other friends were just slogging through the mud. And somebody asked him, how is it that you get up every day and you move these bricks and you build that wall? And what is the difference about you? And what he said was, they are laying bricks. I am building a cathedral. And so it doesn't matter what the outside looks like. It doesn't matter so much. I can see that, there are some jobs where it's just easier to have fun doing it. And yet, it doesn't matter what the job is. There is a way for God to express through it. My life got a lot better when I was doing what looked like data entry clerical work, what looked like the same thing everybody else in my office was doing. But they were doing data entry, and I was assisting the public defenders in ensuring your civil rights, making sure that this country and the freedom and the integrity and the setup that we were constitutionally promised, that continued no matter what. And so I was just in this little back room typing away very happily because my soul was doing something bigger. You know full well I am talking to you. Quit elbowing whoever's sitting next to you. There is something in you that knows full well what is yours to do. Ernest Holmes, in this thing called You, talked about you exist, that divine feeling, fire, imagination, and creativity may be expressed through you. Let me read that again. You exist. The only reason you're breathing and have a heartbeat right now is so that the divine feeling, fire, imagination, and creativity may be expressed through you. The Spirit comes to you with a new and fresh creativity. You need not ask others what others have done or how they've done it. That's not going to be your genius. That's not in the book. The your genius part is in you. Ernest goes on to say, be yourself and express life as you find it. Never imitate. Trust the self. Find the self in God and God in the self. I believe it was Emerson that said something to the effect of imitation is suicide. And I remember reading somewhere that Emerson didn't want to be quoted. Ernest Holmes doesn't want you to be able to quote any textbook, his or anybody else's. What he wanted you to do, what we all want to do, what the divine in you wants to do, is go try it out. The textbook make your spiritual training wheels. But unless you go out and live it, it doesn't matter what was written in that or any other book, any other scripture. We have to take it out into the world and let Spirit flow through each and every one of us. And so this week, I'm going to ask you to get real honest with yourself. Are you stuck in your zone of excellence? Is there a zone of genius that you could take one small step to living in? You don't have to change your entire life today. Don't freak yourself out that way. Take a small step. Maybe you just go find out who around here does parachute jumping. And you can keep that information to yourself. I don't need it, thank you. Look at your life. Are you in your zone of excellence or are you in your zone of genius? Can you love yourself either way? And what is that still small voice within you? I actually heard this morning Dr. Raymond Anderson, God bless him, the minister at the Greater Baltimore Center for Spiritual Living. He talked about, we call it a still small voice because that way we can ignore it more easily. It is not really a still small voice, now is it? It is every sign you see out in the world. It's the music on the radio. It's everything that you keep reading in your books, even if you try and slam that book shut and go to something that is just plain fluff. You will find it over and over and over again. The voice of God is very loud, and you and I both know you can hear it. So what is it you're trying to pretend you don't know that God has been saying to you? What is it that we have all been trying to pretend so that we can be all modest and little and, safe? What is it we could be doing? What is yours to do? That would bring you joy. That would bring you more than abundance. Abundance in every aspect of your life. Now, here's the thing. You deserve, God within you deserves to live from that genius. There's a reason it's there. And part of the genius of Ernest Holmes was creating a way of praying that takes you into your God self, that reminds you and awakens you to it. And so I invite you now to sit with me in consciousness within the one mind that knows and is unafraid of that beautiful, magnificent soul that you really are. Come with me now into that great consciousness, that Christed self that we all are. And take these words for yourself as I say them on behalf of all beings everywhere. God is, and God is all there is. Genius, that beautiful light, that flame of truth that lives in and as each and every one of us is now speaking loudly and clearly and with great love and the promise that spirit supports its own expression. That divine being, that truth is being spoken through in and as each and every one of us because it is each and every one of us. And so in this moment, I lay claim as a Christed being to a level of genius never seen before, done in the way only each of us can do it. Only right here and right now can this be expressed through me, through all. Only in this moment, with this particular individualized expression of the divine that I and all of us are, can God speak through right now. For such a time as this, the world is crying out to hear the truth of spirit, and it is here and now speaking right now, not quietly, not as a still small voice, but as a 75-piece band marching down the road. It is a parade. It is the voice, the heavens opening up with the Alleluia chorus being sung by every angel that has ever existed or ever will. I celebrate here and now that we are stepping into life as avatars of the deity, as the truth. We are singing it. We are acting it. We are writing it. We are living it. We are crunching it in numbers. We are all of that and so much more. And for this I give thanks. For this I give thanks that spirit is all that there is. That this is the truth that always has been and always will be. There is nothing left that can stop that from expressing through us. I celebrate that truth. I know it is the truth. And so it is.